Good day, everyone. My name is Mohau Lecheko. Welcome to this first edition of Mutual Conversations. Before we start, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Ed Mutual Funeral Services. Ed Mutual Funeral Services gives you 10,000 Rand funeral cover for just 200 Rand. Ed Mutual Funeral Services also covers individuals above the age of 85. So if you have a grandmother, nkhono, an aunt, malume, who, when they do pass away, unfortunately, you would be expected to contribute, I suggest that you take out funeral cover for those people. Hit Ed Mutual Funeral Services up. I'll post all their details on the links below after this upload. So yeah, Ed Mutual Funeral Services, thank you very much for sponsoring this conversation today. So now without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest today. The person that I have today is a person that I consider a friend of mine, but he's an individual who has a story of tenacity, I'll describe it like that, a story of perseverance, a story of entrepreneurship, a very, very interesting story. He is in the financial services sector. He also works in the IT sort of space, a very interesting combination of someone working in a traditional financial services sector and also having very, very sort of extensive skills in the IT space. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kgetsepe Mkhabela. Kgetsepe, welcome.
Thank you, Mohau, for having me here. I'm glad I'm here. Thank you, sir.
So, Kgetsepe, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for honoring the invitation. These conversations or these mutual conversations about your journey, about where you started, because a lot of about who we are now was contributed by things that happened way before. Way before you are all stood up and looking nice and looking fresh, and you're a professional. So I'd like to start there specifically. When I spoke to you while we were doing our pre-interview conversations, you mentioned a story about your childhood. You mentioned a very specific event when you were young, in Danalton specifically, that led to you guys moving from that particular space. But you'll tell us more about that. So just tell us about who Kgetsepe Mkhabela is. Where did he grow up, or where did he grow up? And just your early days.
Mohau, yes, I was born in a small town village in Limpopo called Danalton. I was born at home. It's just a couple of kilos, less than 10 kilos away from Kgetsepe. So, and then that's when I was born, and then we left that village to go to my grandparents' village in Hamampuru, also in the mines, that side of Steelport.
Okay, I know Steelport, the roads are very bad there.
Yeah, because of the trucks that have goods from the mine, yeah. So basically we moved from Danalton to Hamampuru due to family quarrels, whereby we found ourselves running in early hours of the morning, changing in at them, even in clothing to get on our day clothes, so that we can catch the first bus that goes to Hamampuru. Then that was the first 5-6 years of my life that I spent in Danalton, where I was born.
So wait. I think you went too fast to that. So in my mind, I see a young Mr. Mkhabela with his mother and a few siblings, and you literally find yourself in a river changing clothes in the early hours of the morning. What specific event or what specific events led to you basically running away from what you had called home for maybe the earlier part of your life?
Yes, when I asked about that event specifically to my grandmother, asking her what actually led us to get to come back home, right? So she did mention that after the passing of my father, when I was like 3 years, what happened was that there was some family quarrels between the siblings of my father and my mother. And then that fight escalated along the years until 3 years later, when I was 6, then we found ourselves running away from our home in Danalton to go to Hamampuru, basically.
So, yeah, that's a very a common story, to be honest. I think most of the viewers that will be listening to the story can relate to it. usually, I don't know why it happens, but usually in our black families, when the father passes away, there's usually a lot of quarrels and a lot of struggles regarding sort of, yeah, the in-laws, and they lead to a lot of drama that happens around. So I can relate to that story as well. But then moving on from there, you guys are basically running away from Danielton. You then find yourselves in Khabamburu. Who are you going to live with there? And just tell me about family dynamics when you arrived in Khabamburu.
So remember, by that time, when we left, it was 4 of us and my mother, 4 children and a mother. We went to Khabamburu to find my grandmother, and then we've also found my uncle's wife and the kids. And then because my uncle was working in the mines there in Witbank, so it was like an extended family. Because in our culture, the last boy actually takes over the grandmother's place, right? So we found that family there. Then we actually extended on top of that, and we lived in one big place as one big family in Khabamburu.
So Munaliboma 8, 9, 10 or something.
Yeah, in a way, because my uncle has about 7 kids. Has about 6 kids, yes. So, but what actually happened was that the kids was actually they were living in Witbank. Right? They'll come only during holidays, right? But the mother was mainly staying there most of the time because my grandmother was blind, so she needed someone to stay with. So we were like a joint family or combined extended family in that regard during holidays, because the kids were like schooling in Witbank. During holidays they'll come back home, and then it would be one big happy family. It was very nice actually.
Yeah, so I think before I sort of move to family dynamics, I'd like to speak about your mother specifically. I know that your mother is late, but how do you remember her? I imagine you were very young. Just tell us about, number one, how do you remember her? But number two, just tell us about sort of circumstances that led to her passing.
When we were there in Danielton, my mother was working in the farms, right? She was working in the farms nearby Khabamburu. And then when we then moved to Khabamburu, what actually happened is that then she got a nice job there by the school. She was cooking for us at the primary school. So she was.
What was the name of the primary school?
Khabamburu Primary
School.
Okay. It was Mamburu Primary School, yeah. So the Mamburu Primary School, she was cooking. She got that gig. That was the best gig for me. It was eating the food, school food,
Yeah.
So everything, whatever they were saving at school, we will have it at home. So
that's nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Fridays there's like quarter bread and peanut butter on it, plus jam.
Nice.
Yeah, so actually it was a very interesting gig that she got. So my mother was someone who likes to sing at church. She was a singer. She just sing around. When she's doing some chores in the house, she would sing. Like she loved singing, and she was a person who loved people. Everyone knew her, right? In Khabamburu, they knew her everywhere because she would go and chill with people. They would play cards and the likes. But every single family, they'll love her. But one thing that stuck was like in our culture, it's like families will always fight, right? Siblings will always fight. So in her father's family, she loved everyone, right? Even though we find that those guys are not talking to her mother, but she'll just go there and just like talk. And she was just a loving person, and she was open, she was bubbly. That's something I remembered. She did not have any beef with anyone, basically. So I think even when we talk about Tufela, and everyone knows, like everyone loved my mother.
And I think there's when we chatted about the story earlier, you spoke about sort of the circumstances around your mother's death, and I'd like you to share that with our viewers, because I think this story is particularly important because when you spoke about it, you spoke about how you did not realize that later on when you were an adult that there was something specific about, I'd say, psychologically in your mind that impacted you about your mother's death that you did not realize, and you only discovered it when or later on. So just tell us about sort of circumstances around the death and that reflection that you had many years afterwards.
That particular scenario, so I think before I can talk about my mother, I should talk about my grandmother. This is a woman who comes from Malahali. It's still in Limpopo next to Skinot, right?
So
the Lulu Mountains, we know the Lulu Mountains, the biggest mountains in that region.
Okay.
So she comes from there. How her story is that she had a boyfriend, and then the family came in to introduce themselves, and then Jiki Kgetsepe just comes out of nowhere, say, "Chief, I'm supposed to marry you." And now she has to drop everything, whatever those other family were doing, trying to come and marry her. Now she has to go with Kgetsepe, right? And apparently those, like, they were related in a way. Like Rahadi, Mwana, Malume, what. So somehow they were related with Kgetsepe. So Kgetsepe came and said, "No, I'm supposed to marry you." And then she had to drop that other family and go with Kgetsepe.
So this is basically the Kgetsepe you were named after?
Yes,
okay.
My grandfather.
Okay.
So my grandmother had to choose Kgetsepe over the guy who already prepared to marry her. Right?
Wow. Okay.
And then now they go to Hamambulu. That's when they settled there. Then a few years later, then she became blind because someone did not like the idea that you left her. So no one entertained that. So what's gonna happen is that then I was not the youngest, but I had a little sister and two big brothers, right? And then I was actually just meaning that wherever she wanted to go, she, just like my mother, she also loved people. She would visit people. Even though she was blind, she's the one who was going to the people.
That's
So,
a hell of a woman.
Yeah, so she will say, "Hey, Mwatu," a weekend, especially in the
Mwatu is your nickname?
Now, Mwatu is Sereto Sak.
Sereto?
Sereto is a totem, right?
Oh, okay. What totem do you venerate? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we have we have derived, right? Mwatu, Ushabirwa, the ladies will be Prebeti, Mahlaku, Huna, and the like.
So now it's like a...
Yeah, not my name, everyone knows me as Mwatu.
Oh, okay.
So Mwatu, basically, I'll go with her everywhere. Weekend, especially Saturday mornings. And I know we'll go to some families that are rich, so that's when I have tea and biscuits. So basically, she'll say, "Okay, this weekend we're gonna go to my brother's place. We'll go the other side, it's about a kilometer and a half. We'll go that side, and another time we're gonna go to Kgetsepe's little brother's place. Well, that's where we're gonna visiting those people, right?" So in a way, she was relying on me. Because I was still young then, I was like 10, 8, 9, 10. I was busy with her. She would, like, I'll go with her everywhere.
So basically you're a guide everywhere.
In a way, I was not ashamed because my big brothers were like teens now and they were like, "I can't do that."
Oh, okay.
They were trying to push a child in there, you know. So I didn't have a problem, I was still young, I did not even, so I was doing that for every single thing with her. Then the story of my mother happened. So life was very good, right? Life was perfect, even though back then my mother was working there by the school, and then my brother and my two brothers, we were head boys for this other family. It was a very rich family. They had like too much hair. There was a time whereby we lost them because we actually played, like, what happened, like Radish, and we have to jump the Dubatse River, right?
Dubatse River?
Yeah,
okay.
It is very big. So we jumped it, then we put on the other side. Then we come back and play soccer on the other side. Bulayana somewhere else, the side of Malekana, Bulayana, and then the river is full. You can't go there. You can't cross now.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, what's happening? Then we went home. When we got home, my grandmother was like, "Okay, you know what, guys? I understand that you lost someone else's cows. So we're gonna now take you back, guys, to another place. So like child. So they had to hide us. So that's my side, right? That's when like family relative. We stayed there for December holidays. So then they found the cows and we came back home.
Oh, okay.
So, but like remember, like whatever you were doing back then, you get a serious beating, no matter what. You get a serious. If you go and swim during December holidays, the river is always full during those times because it's raining. When you come back home, someone like one of your friends get a serious hitting. So that one, it was like imminent that you're gonna get a serious hitting from that family. So you had to run away. So my grandmother plotted that trailer hiding area in our one. So then the year 2000 came, and then it was like 2000 and it was year 2000. So around June, it was winter. My mother was supposed to, she went to the town to Steelport, and she never came back. A couple of days passed, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? And then then my grandmother had to do something about that. So then my grandmother would go to prophets to find out what's actually happening with my mother. I was the one who was taking my grandmother there, and I was in the same room.
Because you're like a guy, like
way,
everywhere, to be there.
I must be there, and I was like 11 by that time. 10, 11, I was that was my age. I think I was in grade 6. Yes, I was in grade 6. I remember very well because they confused our reports that particular semester or June result. So what actually happened is that the prophet told her that no, your daughter's late, right? But tell the police to look this side of the area. So then they found her in the bushes somewhere, and then they took her body parts, and then she was there for a couple of weeks, over a month, and that was a story in that area. And everyone, they look at you, they just like associate you with that particular story, right? That's where your life ended in a way, because everyone just okay, that's the child, that the mother, this is what happened to the mother, and nothing happens afterwards that can be recognized, only during that, right?
Like or summarize that particular story.
Exactly, that's you, that's who you are. So that thing, for me, it was like I said, I just acted like I was someone from the next door neighbor during that particular process. So I did not want to deal with that. I behaved like I distanced myself from the family so that I did not feel whatever other guys were feeling.
So during the time of the funeral?
Yes, the entire time leading to the funeral and the lags, and then the family now tried to gather and then, to help out with the funeral. And then that incident passed, right? And then a year later, my Mohau Lecheko, my mother's sister, and then realized, okay, you know what, these kids are now like, we used to go watch TV in the next door neighbors there, because like the only few houses had televisions back then. That was like early 2000s. So we'll leave and we'll go watch Generations, move on, go late at night, and we'll leave the poor grandmother in the house.
Yeah.
And there was a break, someone came in, stole the empty bottles of beer.
Like the case.
Yeah. So that incident actually led to Mama Holo to say, you know what, I can't risk my mother staying alone. So guys, come move in with me, all of you guys. So that's all my siblings and my grandmother. We went to Hamarishan now.
Oh, okay. So from Danelton, Hamampuru, now Hamarishan. Okay.
So we went to Hamarishan to
Hamarishan is still in Limpopo.
Still Limpopo.
Okay.
Yes, still in Limpopo, and we stayed. That's when we started our secondary school, our grade 8 there. So, and then that was it. So, Hamarishan now, the dynamics changes. we find here's a family, Mamolo's family, whereby there's a mother and a father in a family, which we never had. Right? When I was growing up, I never had that anyway. I did not experience that. So that was a stable family. That was the perfect family for me. Right? So I enjoyed every single moment. There's a father in the house, there's a mother in the house, and all of us, all 9 kids plus a grandmother. Because then from there, 2 years later, the father passed away. Right? And then again, a year later, Mohau passed away. You see, but one thing is that I always recall what my mother used to tell me. I remember this incident back then when I was fighting with my little sister, right? I remember there was a cup of salt in open, and I threw it in my sister's face. We were fighting. Because like me and my sister were like technically like. I was born in 89, she was born in 90.
Oh, okay. So it's 1 year.
Yeah,
it's
what else?
Yeah.
And she that person. Right?
Yeah, I know those people that are like that.
Yeah,
They're
she's
very frightening, those people, because you can't defeat them.
Yeah, so that you can't defeat her. So we were fighting. Then my mother came and then my little sister told her that it's what I did. She like pour salt in her eyes. That was something that I did, and I regret it. So then my mother set me down. I thought she was gonna beat me. And she set me down. She's like, "Watu, Monak, this is your sister. And one thing you should know, you're gonna have to take care of your siblings." She told me that straight from that when I was like 8. Right? She told me that you have to take care of your siblings, and there's gonna be a time whereby you're gonna have to take care of them. I still remember that very well. And I was like, why do you have to sit me down and talk to me like nice? Because I know like every single time, whatever I do, I'll get a beating.
Yeah, it's a beating, yeah.
Exactly. So that was different. And I was so puzzled. So going back to Hamalishani, now that structure that I was not used to also vanishes. A year later, my grandmother now gets taken away by her son. She goes now lives with her son. So it's only now us kids now. Not that we were kids, I was a teen, I was like 17 by then.
Yeah, but like
17, 18, yes. So now it's just like a child-headed family now. All 9 of us, we are in one big family. So no one is working. My big sister, Mwana Mohau firstborn, she used to work in Pretoria, and she came back home to take care of us, right? So now we are now dependent on the social grant of for the kids and our orphanage grant. So that orphanage grant was put aside to help out with studies at varsity. So that was us. Now we have to now depend on that particular grant.
So, Kgetsepe, yeah, like as I mentioned to my viewers earlier, that your story is one of tenacity, to be honest. You now find yourself in a situation where you're basically in a child-headed family. Obviously, I know that it was not fully like that, because as Africans, we live as a community. So there will be always people looking over you and whatever the case may be. Now, how does then Kgetsepe move from, I'd say, that desperately hopeless situation and sort of pursues education? So I think the question that I will ask in this particular aspect is, how were you as a high school sort of individual? What pushed you to ultimately end up at Wits University? Because I would not assume that someone who is in deep Limpopo, who has had the life that he did with so much difficulties, would have the tenacity to Artswe and end up in Joburg. I imagine you've never been to Joburg at that particular point in time before. So what made you push as Gela specifically? And sort of, I'd say, not get yourself held back by a lot of, I'd say, issues that have been throughout your life, to be honest.
Yeah, so to be honest, so I think I'll be lying if I say I had some aspirations in life to do. I did not know those things, right? Life just happened to me. So basically what happened is that after the passing of my mother, the way it was handled, there was no investigation done. So they found the body and that's it. So that actually motivated me to be an investigating officer of some sort in a forensic science side, even though I didn't understand that particular term. But I knew that there must be some sort of like me finding DNA that was involved in the crime scene somehow. So I wanted to pursue that, right? After my high schooling, right? So when we moved to Hamampu to Hamarishan, we went to this school, senior secondary school. We went to that. And in that school was mainly, back then was mainly geography and history school, the majors back then. So I think there was a bit of economics, I think. And then I did grade 8 and 9 there. And then for my grade 10 to 12, then I had to change schools. My mom no, when parents, yeah, you need to move to right? It's like they can't do history. You just can't do history. Go to accounting sciences, just like your sister. And then my sister was doing accounting sciences in Bopedi. She was like 2 classes ahead. When I was doing grade 10, she was in grade 12. Then my first day at school, I went to Bopedi and I just went to science class. Then she came to accounting class, she checked, I was not there, and we got back home, she told my mom, I did not go to school today. I didn't know tomorrow you're adolescent. And I was like, no, I was at school, I was in the science classes. And then from there, it was like a fight, like, why did you choose sciences? Because who's going to now help you with the homework, right? I did accounting, I'm going to help you, I'm going to assist you, I know accounting, right? And I felt like, no, I'm going to stick with the sciences. Even though they made a serious argument to say, listen, I have someone to look after my schooling to help me out. But I said, no, I'm going to see what I can do. And I started my sciences there. And then that was it, basically. I did the high school in there, and like you said, especially in the rural areas, we don't know much. Unlike now, the internet, you can see a lot of stuff, you can see what Josie looks like now, but back then, you can just only see the lights on Generations, the Josie lights back there. But I was not aware how a university looks like. I thought a university is a double story of my school.
This is very funny.
Yeah.
So, because when I asked you about this thing, when we spoke earlier on, you basically said to me, in your mind, a university is school marasa
Upstairs. So I thought that they just become a fancy and making it upstairs.
And this is, what year is this?
That was 2005.
2005. So
2005.
this is after democracy.
Yes.
Yeah.
After democracy, Chief.
And I think this particular portion of your story, Kgetsepe, is quite important, especially within the context of where we are as a country, as a nation specifically, because I believe that story of Wankayoneore, I had no idea what a university is. I used to work in the subcommittees at Wits University when I was still a student in the SRC. And you would have students, even Kanakutsi, 2015, 2016, saying the same thing. Now when I came to Wits University, what is a university? Well, obviously by the Bona TV and whatever the case may be. But I think this story of South Africa and a lot of individuals who are like you going through this thing, they find themselves in this big world in Johannesburg, in tertiary institutions and whatever the case may be. But coming from conditions so that you'd never expect them to be able to triumph. So I think a question that I'll ask you in this particular aspect is, Banabama Haye specifically, when I'm still Mkhabela, what do you think, I'm digressing a bit, but since we're here, I'd like to touch on this. What do you think should be done, especially for Banabama Haye, to make sure that at least a majority of them make it into tertiary institutions, make it into subjects like maths and physics and whatever the case may be? Because it's quite clear that it's not because they are not smart enough. It's just that there's conditions that they find themselves in that maybe disempower them to make it into these spaces. So if you're the magic one, maybe you're the minister of whatever the case may be, what are those important top 3 rural initiatives that you think we should be taking as a society to make sure that there's more Kgetsepes that come out of places like Kgamampuru, for instance?
Yeah, no, you know this. That's when I saw the when I moved to Gauteng. That's when I saw the serious inequality, right? Even though the people in township they think that they're still poor, yes, they are still poor, but they are even the guys in rural areas is even worse, right? I'm not saying they're poor in the form of economic economically so. I would say that the guys in the rural areas, the information is very, very low, right? So yes, they'll eat, everything is fine, they'll cultivate their own food and harvest their own food and everything like and the like. So the most important things I think can actually assist because there are a huge number of students from the rural areas that thinking that when they finish their schooling, they need to get a license, driver's license, and start applying for jobs at this day and age, right? Those guys, remember, they are the guys who get distinctions still, right? Maybe the dynamics might have changed now, but back then they were like that. But now, even now, when I go back home, now there's this guy this young boy who is taking care of a goat at home. What is and asking yourself, this boy is like 19 years old. Why did
That 2022.
Yeah. That his own, that is the solution because of the situation of Alapi. Right? Because when we think of schooling, we think of okay, varsity 50,000 a year, tuition 50,000. So my family does not earn. We are living on grant, social grant. So how are we gonna pay for that? They've never heard of NSFAS, first of all, right? So they don't know how to apply for NSFAS because they don't have smartphones, smart devices. And to apply for that, $200 institution charge, it's a lot for those guys. Goes a long way. That is the money for 50 kg, right? So for them just to take that $200 and apply for one institution, other kids they can apply for 12. But for apply for one institution, so the application fee, that one needs to be scrapped. If you're coming from a rural area, you don't need to pay for that basically because those guys they don't have money for that. Number two, the career guidance CD is skewed because I used to work in an institution whereby we invite the school to come for career fair. So not everyone have access to that. So I think it's best that the students go back to the schools because that way it will be much easier for the kids to ask questions because you can go from Limpopo and come to UJ, come to our cities here and come for career fair and not ask a single question because you can't, the method of communication, you can't converse your question to those people and the students just surrounding you around you and they listen to what question you ask that particular lecturer, that particular professor to explain whatever they are doing. So one of that is a serious problem. So that's why it's best that you take the people coming from there, going back home, and doing those career fairs, because they can ask in their own language.
And they relate. You've been through that process.
I've been through. I took kids to our career open days at varsity, and when I get there, they don't ask questions. I have to ask questions on their behalf and think, okay, this is what you can ask. So when they get there, they just freeze and they never ask questions.
So I think to summarize what Kgetsepe is saying, for whoever is listening, I don't know who's watching this, but the first one and the first biggest one is removing that veil of information. That's what you're talking about. There's just an information gap. Simple things like where is it? Or how do you even access that? That's number one. Number two, there should not be any financial obligations for you to even apply for university for those types of students to begin with. There should never be any finances involved for those particular people because you here in Johannesburg, you might think that 200 rand it's small change because your mom is a teacher, but it's not the case. And number three, it's about how do we change the framework, career guidance. How do we use individuals that have probably went through the same system and the same struggles or whatever to speak to those kids in a language that they understand and that they can relate to. So thank you very much for that. And I apologize for digressing. I think it's just an important topic that I just wanted you to converse on. Now, let's then move, Kgetsepe, from your childhood. You end up in Tembisa, if I'm not mistaken. You come to Johannesburg. You are now a VIT student. What are you studying at WITS? When did you apply? And now, are you living at Rest or whatever? Just tell us about sort of the first 1 or 2 years, even before that, just when you came to Johannesburg.
So actually, remember I did mention that I wanted to do forensic science studies, right? So that particular...
So this is forensic science because you still are very focused on or lady, how am I going to solve that case?
Yes, but then that changed along the way. Right? So in my grade 11, 12, when I spoke to my grandmother, the blind grandmother, right? I'm speaking to you, asking you questions. Coco, this is what's happening. Your son works in the mines. They have medical aid. They have, your son works in the mines. He has enough money to take you to ophthalmologist or optometrist and whatever.
Ophthalmologist,
yes. So
different from optometrist. I remember.
Yes, optometrist get it class.
Okay. Optometrist glasses, ophthalmologist, and doctor one need your math.
Yes. So, okay, why was I ophthalmologist, right? Then she did mention that she went to consult. The son took her, my uncle, and then they suggested a surgery, which she did not agree with because they were white people. She thought, white people can put some funny eyes from a different person, then she's gonna start seeing funny horror movies. She never watched horror movie, but that's what she thought she'll see, right? So, and I asked her, Gogo, what if like about ophthalmologist? Will you allow me to operate on you? She said, yeah, no.
Wow.
Then my career from the career goal forensic scientist changed to being ophthalmologist now. Then when I go to campus, Bramfontein, I went through this, remember there's like straight course to the medicine and there's one through the way we go the other dry.
The BSc 3
the
years.
BSc route, yes. I was taking that route basically. Because I applied for BSc.
So how when you got to campus you were doing BSc in what? Just in general or BSc?
Biological sciences.
Oh, biological sciences, okay.
Yes, so that's what I did basically because to be honest, I did not know because like when you apply, remember when you used to apply back then, all of us who first thing use fast mail, always fast mail was expensive.
Fast mail is a little more these days.
It is, yeah. But back then you don't use a normal post mail, the envelope, you buy the fast mail, and the fast mail back then I think was about 3 rands.
So this was back when post office was still functional, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it should.
Yeah, now it should. So when you're requesting the university to send us the brochure and application form, we ask them, and also including the NSFAS form and the likes, right? Before I know that you can apply independently, back then you will apply part of the application. You will send everything together to the institution. Institutions are the ones that want to process everything, right? Unlike now everything you deal with NSFAS, that's NSFAS on its own. So back then, we'll request those documentation. Okay, please send me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll send you back. And then when you apply, as much as I wanted to become ophthalmologist, because I lacked that career guidance, I did not know what medicine was. I saw this MPHCC, whatever thing there on the form, I didn't know what that thing is, whatever faculty of medicine and the likes, and it's like, I associate medicine with being medical doctor. So that how bad it was. So, but science, they'll talk about science and engineering back then. Science and engineering. So I was familiar with science. So the science was BSc. Okay, sure, Bachelor of Science. But clear, I applied for Bachelor of Science. And then I got there. They said, okay, you can go through medicine through that BSc. So what then happened was that I started the science. I did the biological sciences, chemistry, physics, the basics. And then first year November, my grandmother passes. And then now I no longer have something to do. I lack motivation to study.
The ophthalmologist,
Yeah, ophthalmologist. The ophthalmologist thing now just vanishes. So then I get confused. And I'm like, okay, I can continue with the BSc and finish it. But I feel like, no, but that was not the main reason. Okay, let me try a new course. So now I just hop. I remember I was like confused the following year. In my second year, I was confused. I was attending geology classes, I was attending mining classes, trying to find out what can interest me. And I was hoping and going to different lecture halls and, psychology. I was, very interesting. I remember doing geography there. Every class I was in every class, but the accounting guys, I never tried accounting. I should have. Oh, law. I remember I wrote assignment for this young lady in law. I was trying to see if I can understand law. But
you must not mention names, it's incriminating.
Yeah, no, I'm not mentioning her name. I don't think I remember her name also. But but I know where she was staying in the rest there by Jubilee. Yeah.
Jubilee lady, you must thank this man for your law degree.
Yeah, that's the first assignment that she did. So then I just like everything just from that moment I saw that in life you need to learn to adapt. Right? I was actually fixated on completing what I wanted to complete, but then everything just messed up. And then when I met that particular hurdle, I didn't know how to deal with it. So that's why it's like I was going back to square one, and I can't take the risk because I was not longer in matric to just look around, but I was busy studying, but also I was missing my normal classes, going to other classes that I did not register for. Then there was this course came the very same year that I was actually looking to do something, and it was Bachelor of Science plus Engineering. It's a 5-year course whereby you get out 2 degrees after 5 years. Get a BSc and then you get an engineering degree. And I said, let me just try it out. I tried that course, man. And then I got a sponsorship for that particular course. And then after a year doing that course, I'm like, nah, I can't do this thing, because for me it was difficult. How? You do science, then you do engineering. So basically engineering is just applied sciences, right? So here you do lots of theory, here then you apply them. For me to adjust, it was difficult for me to do them at the same time, because you go to a chemistry class, then you're gonna go to mass balance class, or you're gonna do material science class, and they'll tell you, you guys from the sciences, you stress a lot about these equations. Don't do too much theory. This is how we do it. We don't have to know everything. Just know how to just plug in the numbers, and there you solve the problem. Here you need to derive that particular formula. So I remember the lecturer used to say, no, you guys actually stressing yourself a lot. So I wanted to stick to one side. It's like, no, what's happening here? I can't juggle the two, but other guys could. So for me it was difficult. Then I left that particular course, and I could just go back to BSc and do BSc in mathematical sciences straight. Then the company that gave me bursary to do the engineering and science then found out about that, and they dropped my scholarship. And then now I'm stranded at campus. You've experienced people sleeping in the library, and you yourself also squatting with other kids.
Yeah, hey, we used to squat a lot back then.
Yeah, so then that's my 3rd year there, and then trying to now squat. I was squatting with this guy. He was my neighbor back at home. He was doing medicine. He was staying at EOH, and his twin brother was studying Cuba medicine also. Both of them, they were doing medicine. So what used to happen is that I would leave Tembisa on Monday, and then I'll come back to Tembisa on Friday. So I'll leave Tembisa Monday morning, take a train to Joburg, and then during the days I'll squat. I'll go to EOH around 4 a.m. when he wakes up, goes to the shower, and then I go sleep. And then around 9 o'clock I wake up and I go back to school campus, right? So that was the scenario, and then also there was a dean of students. Then she gave me a voucher to have lunch at the dining hall throughout the year. So at least I know that I had some food. And also the gentleman there by EOH will have, like, the slices at the evening.
Oh, I remember those two slices.
Yeah, 2 slices. And for me, then now.
This other guy used to give me the kukuzi, like they used to get Thank you very much to dining hall guys who used to share their food with us.
Yeah, so it was very hard because then I started taking up a job by the university. I went to marketing. I asked them, guys, can I get some piece job? No, you can actually post posters about events at campus, right?
Oh yeah.
Then I'll tell my friends, and I'll give other friends in my same class, and they'll help me. They'll go to medical school, education campus. They'll plug those things for me, and also I'll plug when I have a time during the night. So, and I'll get paid about $1,000.
Yeah, that's
1,000, 2,000, depending on how. So we'll invite schools, send them letters to come for our open day. We'll prepare for the open day. And whenever there's an inaugural lecture, we need to publicize it. So that was my job, basically, working at, and also those events, they always have some snacks.
Oh yeah.
So I'll know that whenever when I organize that, when you organize that event, publicize it, I'll go to it. Because they know me, the guys organize, they'll know me. So even though no one students are not invited, I'll go in. So I'll eat during those functions and the likes. So that year I applied. Then I started to apply for jobs. I'm like, you know what? I don't have a bursary. I only have voucher of the meal once a day. Who's gonna pay for my fees?
And I think this is the interesting part now, because, and I think you're going to it. It's how did you then transition? Because were you able to finish your studies at that particular point?
No,
you weren't.
I did not. Why? Because next year it was a teen time bomb. I can study this year, but they can't release my results without the funds. And how am I going to register? I remember a sister that particular year that I was in, third year there, right? That was like 2010. Applied for voluntary job at World Cup. Also, so the sister of my friend, she paid for the registration fee on that particular year, right? So, and then that's when now I started applying for. I applied for this bank job in town, head office, at the cash center where I counted funds, and then I worked there for like a month. I thought it was a holiday job. The second month, I'm telling them, guys, I have to go back to school. The schools are open now. I was like, but this is a permanent job, chief. What's happening? No, I did not know there was a permanent job. Sharp. Then I had to resign. They understood my thingy, my reason, and I had to resign and go back to campus. And then later that year, later in November, then I applied for this big insurance company. I applied for their leadership. And then they said, no, you can start next year, February, in Pretoria. So that's when now I'm like, okay, no, I can't really. There I wrote my exams, but I can't get my results. I was owing them about 90K.
So you wrote your final year exams?
Yes.
But you actually don't know if you passed or not, because you cannot get the results because you still owe them over 90K.
Exactly. And I'm like, okay, I need to repay them. And then whenever they send me a statement, that thing, the interest on a monthly basis is about 250 rands there every single month, right?
So you owe them and then they charge you interest on that loan, or they handed it over probably to attorneys, or
it was still coming from them.
Oh,
I'll go to campus and inquire, and then they'll print out stuff. They're still within them, but it was interest bearing, right? So for late payment maybe, I think. So what really happened is that I started working now at this big insurance company, and then I started now paying them about 500 rands a month.
Okay.
It was like a fixed stipend. And I started paying them $500 a month, blah blah blah. And then a year passes, and then we graduate from the leadership, and then they take us on a contractual basis, 6 months contract basis. And then 2013, I'm like, aye man, what can I do with my life? I'm like, okay, I saw this ad on Google and saying that you can do a 1 year worth of Java programming. From there, they place you in a workplace. I'm like, no, I can do that. Then I apply for it, I write assessment tests, I pass, and then I go in. It's based in Gauteng, like a small sort of like college. And then
so this was still, you were still working in the financial space?
Actually, I resigned there.
Oh, you resigned. Okay.
I resigned, then I went to join that particular program.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of nowhere, a former colleague of mine, when I was working in the insurance company, he was a retention officer. He was retaining the lapse policies.
Oh, okay.
And then I was in administration, I was capturing everything, whatever, assisting the financial advisors. So he was actually retaining those. Upon his resignation, 3-4 months before, he told me what he was doing. When he left, then I took over, but I was not hired for that role. I just worked at my role and his role.
Okay.
Then that's why I resigned, like, but I'm doing two things. Why can't just replace me on that or just put me on that new role, right? They did not. That's why I left. So then he phoned me 6 months later, like, Chief, I'm making money this side. I know you are very motivated. Come join me in the sales industry. And I'm like, this guy, I had to finish this thing. And I did not finish my Java programming course.
So you don't finish that one as well? Yeah.
That one I was like, it was like left with about a month to finish. Because we were I knew how to code everything done. So we're doing projects now to present to the companies that are going to hire us.
Oh, yeah.
So I was in the middle of that preparation of the presentation. They give you, like, those funny projects about library, coding for library stuff, right? So then I'm like, okay, Chief, what do you say? What are you saying exactly? Showed me his pay slips. This guy's making too much money. I'm like, I didn't want to join you. Then I'm like, forward my number to your manager. And the manager phoned me, come for interview. I went for interview. Voila, packaged inside, right? No, I start.
This is financial advisory now.
Yes, financial advisor now, right? So it was very hard.
People don't know that. It sounds nice. They don't know that's hardcore sales.
It's hardcore sales. You're a salesman. You're an insurance salesman, basically. And one thing is this, is that the insurance is just the bourgeoisie sort of like way of our stock first, basically. At home, there is that insurance. There is funeral societies. Society, everyone, there's a society for the also, for a car, for food, for whatever. There's a society for everything, right? When you pass away, that you're gonna have coffee, what. But this one is just another one. This one I'm in now is a fancy one by actuaries. So remember, when you grow up at home with those societies, that's what you know. But now I come to you, Mohammed, you can actually have a life cover. And your first impression is like, I saw people kill each other, getting their life cover,
Yeah.
Then it was a bit sort of like, people do not really trust it if they don't grow in that thing. Because I know there was this lady heading an Ectas back then there by campus, right? She was white. And when I told her, listen, this is what I do, she's like, yo, Chief, I need to sort my life. I need those things. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And she knew how important it is in her life because her parents actually taught her that.
So she had financial literacy from at home. Yeah.
Exactly. For them, it's a standard thing. Right? In their culture, it's a standard thing to have such things. But in our culture, you have to unlearn whatever you learned, which I'm not saying that whatever we know is wrong, it was right. Just that we do not commercialize it. Those things are based in a community. Every community has it.
So the principle of putting money away for events like funerals, manyalo, and whatever, it's things that we do as Africans.
We were doing. We knew how to accumulate the wealth through farming, and we knew everything. That's what we were done. We were doing those things. Those things were done.
This is quite profound because Mkhabela, what you are challenging the narrative here. Because there's a narrative that says, black people or people of African descent, financial literacy is out of we just don't get it. But when you're saying the principles are there, it's just that we aren't commercializing it as you would see it, or we probably aren't applying it in the same way, or maybe the principles are not as relevant now. What are you particularly saying? Because you yeah.
Okay, if I take you back, okay, back then every single family household had a car, right? They had some livestock. They were farming. When we went to Ramalishani, the father in the house was a farmer himself. He was doing farming and whatever. So we will farm and then we will store the wheat and the maize for a period of 12 months until we go farm again. So we will store. And in Kgetsepe, we will this right? So it's like basically it was savings. Yeah. So whatever I give away or whatever I put away, I'm gonna get it back. Right? So you can see, remember, like there's time for harvest, there's time for planting. So that was the case. So we'll store those things. Right? Back in the days, people store, like not back in the days, like in 2004, 3 or 5, 3, 4, 5 when I was in Mahamarishan, we're doing the same thing. We'll go harvest, store that, and it's going to sustain us throughout until the next time to plant.
And literally that's the basis of
that's
what
how we used to do. So we'll go, and there's the cow, we'll get milk from the cow, there's chickens, we'll get eggs from the chickens. So that was the household I was living in. It was just self-sustaining, right? That's why we used to go to town once a month. Unlike now every time after work you pass by the shops, get something to eat tonight, the following day. That's what we do. We are now programmed to just spend. But back then we used to do things differently. Like I said, just now these things of what like people used to do, now they just someone has to go to school, become an actuary, and try to come build some models for us and say, calculate the risk. But we still do it even now, right? In the black communities.
So, Kgetsepe, this is while we're still on this topic, or the part of your career, or one part of your career, which is in financial advisory and whatever the case may be, I think it will be of value to our listeners to sort of ask you the question of most of my viewers are young professionals who are starting off in their careers. Some of them are a bit seasoned in their careers. What would you say, or what would be the main advice, or the 2 or 3 main advices that you normally give people who are young professionals, who are starting to make a bit of money? What types of policies should they take? What types of things should they prepare for? How would you advise someone who's starting off versus someone who probably has been working for over 10 years? So I just try to tap into your mind as a very seasoned financial advisor. What are the biggest things that you could advise young professionals like myself to manage their financial lives, if I can call it that?
I've been doing this thing for over 8 years, 9 years now. So what I would say is that I'm gonna give you an example.
Yeah.
You just get an internship, get a nice pay there. After the internship, and then first thing you're gonna do, you're gonna buy a car, for example, right? It's good, buy a car. Are you aware that every single car you're gonna have a car insurance, right? People have an understanding that I need a car insurance because should something happen to the car, I can get it paid off, right? You're gonna get a lump sum to pay it off whatever debt that you took, right? So, but they forget that the number one asset, remember you're still youngster, you don't have any dependent whatsoever. Your parent might be working, you don't have a child or a partner. So one thing that they forget is that they are professionals, they're working, they're starting up. The number one asset is themselves. They don't have any asset that generates income for them. It's them generating income on a monthly basis. Forget about you leaving a legacy to your kids and your family and whatever. What about you? Should something happen to you and not be able to work for 3 months, how are you going to now survive?
I was stranded.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So they insure the car, but forget to insure themselves.
Wow.
So you can actually have yourself a salary protection. So listen, should I be off work due to health and ill health, right? because they get diagnosed with some sort of like disease and might go through some chemo for a couple of months.
I mean, it's a very relevant one is like COVID. I mean, there are people that COVID put them off work for like months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, if you're in
They were young people, those ones. There's people that I know who were young. And, yeah.
So you see now, then you are stranded. You're gonna have to move back home, and you're gonna now have put more strain on your parents, which is not good.
Yeah.
So of course the parents won't kick you out.
But you're just saying there's a way to prevent that, mitigate that risk.
Exactly. Yeah. So why do you want to insure a car? You have medical aid, right? That's good. But what about your salary? You need to. That's the number one thing that you need to do.
Because you won't even be able to pay that medical aid without that salary.
Just have an income.
I've never had someone say this before, guys. I'm gonna put Kgetsepe's details and contact details. He is a financial advisor. Please get into contact with him for anything that is financially related. But anyway, what other sort of advices would you give to young professionals regarding these types of stuff?
One thing is that try by all means to study or get advice on. Remember, now you need to insure yourself, right? Then from there, now think about generational wealth, right? Not that people have different beliefs, but it is just check the way you grew up. Every single black person struggled, right? We know that. So if you can just give yourself, like, just think of what your parents could have done to make things easier for you, right? People talk about, they throw the words of black tax around a lot. So don't you think if your parents managed to build that home, would you still build it? You see now. So that means you will start afresh without building the house. So why don't you build that house now so that the kids won't have to do it for you?
Wow, that's like a mindset shift that you.
Yeah, so you need to prepare now, right? So the number one gift that you can give to your kids is the gift of them not taking care of you. What is that?
Wow.
Make sure that you prepare for yourself for retirement. You can do it multiple ways. I don't want to go and buy a retirement plan at the insurance company. No, you can do it. You can buy assets that can actually give you that retirement. You can buy properties. You can build a business at the age that you're doing. So you know that those things are going to sustain you in the future, right? So plan around that. Make sure that you building a legacy, a generational wealth. Do something for your kids that your parents didn't do. Because what I used to see is that I used to have like both black and white clients, right? White clients, what we do is that they know that we're going to have a child in the next 3 years. They will start now saving for that child's education, right?
An unborn child.
An unborn child. We used to call it ghost child. So because they understood that paying fees does not only start at varsity, right? It starts from preschool, which is about 3,600, 4,000 now a month. So you see that you are paying for varsity, but what about now? That means you're gonna use credit card to pay off your child's school fees, right? So you need to plan. So 3 years later, you might have about 150,000, 200,000. You're sorted from the entire primary school and preschool. You see, so that's the problem, that we don't plan ahead, which is very important to plan ahead. So our black counterparts is that we feel like our parents didn't do this thing for us. Why should I do it for my kids? That's a serious psychological disorder, chief. Serious. It's like now you are angry, you're bitter now. I did not. Look at where I am now. I had to struggle. They must struggle also.
You're not realizing you're perpetuating this thing.
Yeah, you are not sick, but it's a disorder. Why do you want someone to go through that hardship? I'm not saying spoil your child.
Yeah.
Prepare something that can actually help them. Because if you look now, right, the jobs that you guys are taking up now, there's 5 years later, or let's just 2 years later, you'll surpass that 350,000 a year. Some people starting salaries 350,000. So forget about NSFAS. Your kids are going to have NSFAS. Just forget about it. So that means you're going to have to now pop out. If you want your kids to go to varsity. If not, there are courses online your kids can take. Don't even mention art schools. Those things are expensive, right?
Mm.
So if you don't want your kid to go to a traditional university, there are other colleges or schools that the kid can go to, but those are very expensive. You need to be prepared for such, right? So that's my point, because remember, you don't want your child to be like the way you grew up, whereby you don't tell your parents that there's a trip at school, because you know that they don't afford it. You won't even mention it. If there's a trip to certain whatever, there's a certain trip at school, you don't want to bother your parents because you know that
it's about circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't let your kids to do the same thing that you did.
So I think, guys, I hope you're catching the nuggets here, because he is speaking, number one, about how important you are as an individual. So we go to the gym, we take care of our bodies. You need to financially take care of yourself as well. You are the main asset that you have, especially when you're starting off your career. Cover yourself, cover your income. That's what I mean, right? And then number two, he's speaking about recalibrating your mindset. There's an important point there where Skabata, the very same things that happened in your life to translate into the lives of your children. So basically breaking, I think religious people will say generational curse or whatever the case may be. But financial literacy is also about the mindset. You breaking or having a mindset to break sort of the bad financial habits that we had growing up or in our families. But yeah, thank you very much for that, Kgetsepe. We're closing off our conversation shortly, but I wanted to then speak about, I know you mentioned earlier that you did some course, programming and whatever the case may be, but what led now to you, because I don't think a lot of financial advisors are in the coding industry or know how to code and whatever the case may be. I think they're just pure salespeople. But now, when you found yourself pivoting into the tech, data science, data analysis space, how did that happen, and how are you finding it? And actually, just for people who don't know, what do you do in that particular space?
Okay, before I get there, I wanted to just give it a dynamic view that when I left Bramfante, went to insurance industry, is that I then, because all along I had an entrepreneurial mindset. Right? I remember I was a treasury at school there at Bramfontein, whereby I was a treasurer of Roots and Shoots organization, student organization, whereby then we were doing recycling, basically. It was about global warming, following up on Al Gore's concepts, right? So saving energy and the likes, blah 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 blah. So that actually, then I said, okay, how about we do the spins that actually does not overflow, right? So we had to come up with an idea from that moment. So I wanted to, I was always entrepreneurial in my life, right? And then during the Inectus competition.
Shout out to Inectus, by the way. If you're a university student and you need a society to join and you're very entrepreneurial, please hit up. It's an organization called Inectus. Most of us learned a lot of our entrepreneurship through that particular. That's why I actually met him. But anyway, that's a story for another day. Continue.
So I remember, if you listen to 702, you'll know the Pablo Fitidis guy is a business incubator. So, and he asked.
Pablo, is that one was student?
He was there by Inectus, but he always gets inside on
Facebook. I know that gentleman. I know the guy.
So then he said, okay, someone can come in front with an idea. I give you 30 seconds to present your idea to me. Then I went in front, and then he said, okay, I know that you want to do a business, but you need to know people skills. You need to have people skills. Go do sales job for 5 years. So me being in the sales industry actually was part of the plan. It's okay, for me to be an entrepreneur, you need to understand people, right? Because you're gonna solve their problems at the end of the day. So then that actually helped me a lot. So along the way, he just did some entrepreneurial stuff all along. So but you get into the industry, okay, the ultimate goal is for you to become a fund manager or a actuarist, an actuary in a way, because that's the stuff that you're exposed to. But something that I learned was to pivot. Because when I did that Java thing, when a friend of mine, that guy actually invited me to come, I said, okay, I can actually program my way of meeting the client's appointments. accordingly. Nearest salesman algorithm. That was the idea of me being efficient, but basically it's just about closing the sales, not about how to arrange your appointments in a smart way, but what are you going to arrange with people to see. So that was the idea, to say, okay, can I have a system that I can arrange it in a nice way, and an app of some sort, right? So then in life you have to pivot. Like, there's a lot of challenges in life. You can't stay stagnant. The world is changing, right? So I have a close friend of mine who was like, well, I see you understand that you want to become a CFA at the end, become a fund manager, but those guys are going to be replaced by IT. Why not do IT? Because then I was doing my qualification part-time, Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics and IS, right? But before I included the IS, I was doing BSc Pure Maths and Applied Maths. So it's like, no, include the IS that can teach you some basic IT skills. I did that, and then in my final year, and then I saw this internship. They needed a postgrad qualification in IT stats and quantitative studies, and I applied.
You applied either way.
I applied either way. I don't know.
This is another principle, guys. So lifelong learning, because this man has been, I don't know how many degrees you've been doing, in fact. But number two, this guy, he does things anyway. So try it anyway. It doesn't. If they say that you don't qualify, just do it anyway. That's my advice.
Yeah. So one mistake that people make is that if you can invite me to an interview, just know that I'm going to qualify. Doesn't matter if I'm qualified or not. So don't take that chance to invite me. just reject me outright.
Yes.
So this guy took chances, and then he invited me for an interview. And then, cut story short, I landed that particular data analytics internship role, and later on I'm doing it full time, right? But one thing that you asked that I explained that particular.
Yeah, just tell us briefly what type of.
Basically, the data science, data analytics, they vary from company to company, because people will hire you as a data scientist, but you want to do data analytics role job. They want to hire you as a data analyst, and you're going to end up building some models there and algorithms. So basically, is that it depends on company to company. But for me, it's just basically glorified statistician.
Okay.
You need to know your stats. Basically, what you do is just understanding what data you have. Remember, data is just data. It's like, okay, we have this information about our clients, about the situation in South Africa. Status, they release these results about unemployment, about level of education in South Africa. That's basically data, right? The statistician come and model it and come give it to us in a nice format that we can understand. So those data scientists, data analysts, basically they do the same thing for the businesses now, not informing, but coming about solutions to that information that they gathered from that. What can they do to build a solution for the business? So we call them data scientists, data analysts. Basically, those guys are just glorified statisticians. So that's why the level of statistics is very needed in that roles. So that's basically the industry I'm in. The banking sector, I think. Yeah.
So basically, from I'd say requirements perspective, if there's a young person somewhere at a university, or specifically young professionals who probably are looking for a change and changing industries, what types of sort of backgrounds or experiences would you need to have to pivot into that particular space?
To be honest, I think you don't need a specific qualification of some sort.
Okay.
So all you need to have an entrepreneurial mindset of solving problems. Because we work with people from different backgrounds: psychologists, rocket scientists. We work with data. We work with mining engineers, chemical engineers, mathematicians, computer scientists. Everyone, right? People who did like dramatic arts, right? it's all about having an eye of seeing a trend with whatever you are trying to solve. Trying to understand, okay, what am I trying to deal with? Even though you can put in a normal technical way, but you can be able to see that. But something's happening here. Remember, there's always a colleague that can help you to finalize that, right? So you don't really need to have a specific qualifications. So my point is that learn to think out of the box, learn to solve problems, whatever in whatever space you are in. Might be a medical doctor, it might be a practicing nurse, paramedic. You are needed in the industry, right? Because we're dealing with people, we're dealing with different data sets that we are people, we know ourselves. So you know your neighbors, you know your colleagues, you know everyone around you. So you just need to now interpret it in a technical way, which you get taught when you get to work. During that internship, they teach you how to put things in technical ways. But to think, you think in a normal way, like a normal person, then we can now put it in a technical way so that you can make business sense and you present to your boss, he gets impressed. But think in a normal way and solve the problem in a normal way, and then from there act those, because it's just a tool. Technicality is just a tool, basically, how to use this software, how to use this particular algorithm or program to deliver your thinking. That's basically it.
I think to summarize that, guys, he's basically saying that the technical skills anyone can learn, right? It's quite easy to learn these things. I mean, you can even learn them online these days. You don't even have to go to a varsity, because most of the interviews in these particular contexts are usually technical interviews where you're actually tested on your knowledge of that thing. But don't be afraid, whether you're in the arts, whether you're the humanities, if you want to make a career change, data analytics and data science is there for the taking. Invest in yourself, basically. So, Kgetsepe, we've done full circle. We moved throughout your journey. And I would like to sort of conclude this conversation by asking you one last question about, I would say, legacy and your journey. You're still young and upcoming. There's still a lot of things that you're going to do in your life. And I'm glad that I get opportunity. I'm actually happy that I get an opportunity to speak to young professionals who are not on your newspaper articles and front pages as yet. So I'm basically speaking to potential, a lot of potential. So the question that I'm going to ask you, which will be the last question, or my parting question with you, is what do you want Kgetsepe to be remembered for? What is the legacy that you would want to leave in this world? What mark would you want to make?
To be honest, right, so one thing that I realized early on in my life was that for me to change things was to go the entrepreneurial route. Because working, getting a salary for me won't feed 10,000 people, right? So I won't split that particular income of mine to 10,000 people. It's just too little for that. So the best way is for me to actually have, I believe that my purpose is to change people's lives, because that will be coming from my family. I'll start with my family. To start with my family, also splitting your salary is not enough. You want sustain multiple families, so you need to have a sustainable business that can hire your family members and your neighbors and the people back at home, so that they can work for their families. So that is the main thing that I need to achieve in life. And right now I'm in a journey of trying to do that, to change the livelihoods of people and to impact them in that regard, to create opportunities for them than sharing my income with them. So I need them to earn their own income, and I want to make that possible.
Very profound. Kgetsepe, thank you very much for honoring this invite. We really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have learned a lot from some of the stuff that you've mentioned. We thank you for your journey. We thank you for giving us an opportunity to have a small insight into your life. I know that we can't talk about everything that has been happening in your life, but that little insight that you gave us today. We're very much grateful for it.
Thank you, Mohau, for having me.
So guys, thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone who's going to watch this particular show. The purpose of this show, or the Mutual Conversations, is to speak to young professionals like Kgetsepe, to hear their stories, find similarities, learn from his career, from his journey, get motivation out of it, find synergies, whatever you can get from this particular conversation. That is what it's meant for. And so until we meet again in our next episode in the Mutual Conversation, I'd like to thank my guest. I'd like to thank our sponsors again. I'll post a link of Kgetsepe's details. I told you earlier that he's a financial advisor, and so I'll put details of or his contact numbers below. Until we meet again, until we have another Mutual Conversation, please have a wonderful remainder to your day. Thank you.